Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you about my project Invisible Stories, which took place in a small village in Kildare called Allenwood last October. And I'm just going to talk to you, tell you a little bit about myself and my background, the background to the project and its manifestation in County Kildare. So first of all, I'm from Allenwood, and I studied history of art. But my focus turned to contemporary art when I started working in the National Gallery in Dublin. So I was there for 6 years. And in 2011, I moved to Stockholm for an MA in curating contemporary art. And then I moved to Berlin, and in 2015, I returned part-time to Stockholm to participate in a program called Curator Lab, a research program. And since then, I work as an independent curator based in Berlin, and I'm the gallery director of an artist-run space in a former fish factory called Ada Post. And last year was the first initiation of Invisible Stories. So the background is that since living away in 2 countries in Northern Europe, I noticed different idiosyncrasies between the customs that we have. First of all, the first thing that I noticed was when I think a lot of us in this room, we're culturally bred to do a double take when we see a magpie. It's just something that we've grown up with, one for sorrow. And then I was sitting with friends in university in Stockholm, and they weren't having the same reaction to these birds when they were walking by during lunchtime. And then I began to notice other little differences as well, that in Ireland we always we cross our fingers when we're wishing someone luck, but in Stockholm they press their thumbs, and it's the same in Germany. And I just was wondering about how these things have arisen, and all these little 2 Northern European countries, you would think that we were very, very similar, but there's always these little things that give us away. So the project beginnings was that I applied to Curator Lab, which is a research program in Stockholm. And when I was accepted, I decided to focus on these aspects of folklore and culture. And it was around this time that I visited the National Folklore Collection in UCD for the first time. And it really opened my eyes. I was absolutely blown away by all the stories that just related to tiny, tiny little Allenwood in North Kildare. So many stories that had been collected about the area. And I'm sure everyone here knows about the school's collection, but in case anyone doesn't, it's material that was collected from school children in the 1930s, and it's housed in UCD, and it's one of the largest ethnographic collections in the world. And it's all digitized now, which is fantastic, at www.ducas.ie. So I'll move on to the next one. So as I said, project beginnings was Curator Lab with Joanna Vorsha in Konstfack in Stockholm. But when I was doing this research, part of the program was that we would have a lot of group crits and feedback on our projects. And the feedback was always the same for me, that it was quite difficult for me to expect an artist to engage with the material, this body of work, in the same way that I would, coming from Kildare and being based in Stockholm at this time. A lot of the other students on the course, they were working with maybe more accessible materials, such as different philosophers like Wilhelm Flusser, that they could approach an artist with these books and then work together on something. But it was a little bit different with the folklore. I found that it might have been difficult to expect an artist to work with material from Kildare while presenting it in Stockholm at the same time. So the feedback that always came back was that I should work with the material myself, which was quite nerve-wracking because I'm more of a curator or an artist facilitator rather than a maker in my own right. So this project, it manifested as a video installation called 7 for a Story. And it dealt with folklore and identity construction. And one of the things that I noticed when researching the archives was that a lot of the the guidelines issued to the schools had a very strong nationalistic focus. And when you think about the 1930s, that Ireland is trying to establish itself as this newly formed state and trying to differentiate itself as a different country and a different culture, it was probably something to be expected in the guidelines as well. So when researching the work, I'll just show you some snippets of what I found. So this is a house which is now a pub. It used to be a famine hospital in the 19th century. And a story associated with it is that we will know when the end of the world is near when a black pig runs out of the gate at Wilkinson's and runs across the bog. So it's something we have to watch out for. Jack Wise saw fairies dancing on the Allenwood Road at 10 o'clock one evening. So Moll Anthony Dunn of the Red Hills was a wise woman with a cure for people and animals. She died during the 19th century, but gave her cures to her son, and some of the cures are still used. She was looked upon as kind of a witch. Her name was known in all parts of Leinster. And Willie Champ fainted after seeing the Banshee returning from a funeral one night. So it's quite a mixture of mythology, social history, and then just sometimes gossip as well, which is makes for a fascinating mix of reading material. And as I said, when I was reading the guidelines on collecting and researching the archives, I was thinking a little bit about identity construction, and I was thinking about where to position this exhibition in Stockholm. And I thought about what do we see as a construction of Irish identity when we're abroad. So that led me to the pub, and I decided to install this exhibition in an Irish pub in Stockholm called the Dubliner. And in this exhibition, in this pub, I inserted a video I made called 7 for a Story, which you can see up here. And as a way of disseminating the stories through the pub, I made beer mats, which would have photographs of locations on one side and then stories associated with them on the other. Then, because not everyone who went to the pub knew about where Allenwood was, I videoed a journey which mimicked the journey in 7 for a Story, and showed it in the cloakroom alongside the video. And then I interspersed photographs of Allenwood, water collected from holy wells, and St. Bridget's crosses amongst all the material in the pub. So that brings us, that's the background to Invisible Stories. So it'll take us to Allenwood last year. And some of you might not know where the metropolis of Allenwood is. I'm very surprised if you don't. And it's located along the Grand Canal in North Kildare in the Bog of Allen. It's got, according to the 2011 census, 845 inhabitants, built on a crossroads, and the Bournamona Power Station was located there and demolished in 1992, and we all gathered in a field to watch it being demolished. It was a big day. And then we have 2 primary schools there as well. So I always felt that I had to bring this material back to Allenwood. It wasn't a material that was just solely for an academic setting in a pub in Stockholm. I felt that this material had to be returned to the people from where it originated. And so I decided to organise this festival called Invisible Stories. So the aims of Invisible Stories were to use artistic methods to bring this research back to its origins, as not everybody knows of or has access to the internet, to the archive, or they may not be readers. It might not be the method most suitable to them. To bring the wonder of the folklore back to the community, and to activate the archive by taking the information back to the outside world. To reintroduce the oral art of storytelling, to engage the different sections of the community, to encourage intergenerational communication, to take contemporary art practice out of the urban centres and locate it in rural settings, and to introduce artists working outside of traditional artistic media to a community setting. Apologies for the typos. So the methods I used to achieve these aims were to insert the project into a variety of locations, and I'll talk about that in a moment. To broaden the subject matter to include not only folklore, but also local history, community, and widen the areas of interest. And the events I organised were the opening of the festival in Glennon's pub, the exhibition, the same beer mats that I'd used in Stockholm, music, Ken O'Brien on Friday, and a trad session on Saturday, a bus tour parodying a touristic bus tour to the Hill of Allen and Ballateague Castle, seminar, film screening, schools project, Scouts group catered for the school project, a gathering, which was an opportunity to swap stories, and audio walks, which are ongoing and accessible to everybody with a smartphone. So I'll just talk a little bit about the artists and the challenges working with artists in a rural setting and a small community. So the challenges for me, I felt that were presenting art to a mainly non-art audience. Many of the people I would be presenting it to would maybe never have been to a museum or to a gallery in their life, and I wanted to present something to this audience. Presenting art in a non-standard exhibition space and working within the perimeters of specific subject matter. So that had an impact on the type of artists that I could invite as well. I had to find artists who would be comfortable with the above challenges, to find artists who would be relatable to the audience, to find artists who would respond to sites within the community and itself and who could incorporate elements of landscape, folklore, local history and storytelling into their work, to find artists who would treat the project and material with respect, to find artists who can easily travel to Allenwood and conduct research, because I didn't feel it was appropriate for artists to make work in another site and bring it and install it. They had to be involved with the location from the beginning. And after research and chatting to both artists, I decided to work with Pamela Debris, a local artist from Prosperous, who I think the mayor mentioned her project Little Stories, Little Prints earlier, and Vanessa Dawes, an artist based in Dublin. So Vanessa Dawes, her practice involves swimming, and she uses swimming to investigate ideas of place, and she calls herself a swimographer. I won't read her entire statement here because I'm running out of time, but she discovered through research in the county libraries that Thomas McCormack was born in Allenwood and was returning from America when the Lusitania sank, and he was one of the survivors of the Lusitania. And he had learned to swim by swimming in the canals in Allenwood. So I'll just show you a video. This is part of her, oh sorry, 1 second.
Thing was, I remember my dad saying that he used to say, they say to him, well, what did you do? I mean, he was in the water for like 11 hours. And I said, what did you do? And he said, well, I used to swim on my back for a while, and I'd turn over for a while and turn around a while, you know, as corners you would get, just had to keep moving, that was it.
Okay, and she interviewed 2 of his grandchildren who still live in the local area, and she swam between 2 bridges of the canal and recorded this with a GoPro as she was swimming. The second artist, Pamela Debris, I'll just skip some of these. She works with communities and is a collector of different types of materials such as stories and documentation. She, for this project, I'm running out of time, I feel. I'll play this clip. She travelled around and collected stories from local people.
The new moon, you know, he's only a stripe. If he's standing straight, sign of a good moon. If he's in the winter, then if it's the full moon or first quarter line on his face is a sign of frost. If he's on his back, then, and then if he's muddy, the next day was going to be wet. That's how they read the weather then. And then
the exhibition took place in the local pub. So you can see these audio recordings were collected in boxes where people could gather around a table, listen to them, and then swap their own stories as well. There's video piece, that's my mum, and on the right you can see it's not the best image, but it's Vanessa's film about Thomas McCormack. And then I don't know if I have time, but I did a schools project as well. This is all documented. 1 minute, I hear from Liam. And it was to echo the project from the 1930s, working with the same age group. And it was absolutely amazing. I was so worried that children would be so enthralled by screens these days that they wouldn't have this taste or this wonder for folklore. But once you started talking, they just loved ghost stories. And for the exhibition, which took place in the GAA hall, we collected old photographs of Halloween, ghost stories about the area. This is one that was actually about my uncle, which I had to check with my uncle afterwards because I'd never heard of. And they were placed around the GAA hall where people could read. Then we did a folklore tour to the bus of Allen, or the Hill of Allen, and it was basically my research in action. And the treasure of this bus tour was the bus driver, because while I had the folklore information, he had the local history. So it was like we were a double act, and it was really, really great. Then we showed Eat the Peach, which was a film filmed in the area in the 1980s. Music on both nights, and a seminar with Chris Dorr from the Folklore Collection, Tristram from the Bog of Allen Nature Centre, Tony McKenna, who is the archivist with Bordnamona Heartlands, which is this wonderful archival project initiated by Bordnamona, and Harry Price, who is the descendant of Moll Anthony, who was the witch I referenced earlier from the 19th century. And he is the person in possession of these cures today. So difficulties and learning experiences. I live in Berlin, so it was a little bit difficult for me I have to wrap this up, so let's go on to successes. Most people who attended were quite positive about the experiences, and it was an uncovering of local history and half-forgotten stories. And the school children really enjoyed the project. The Facebook page saw a lot of engagement. People chatted with each other and shared stories with each other, and I learned a lot that I didn't know. And I'm just going to leave it there. So if anyone has any questions about it, you can talk to me about it later. But I'm getting the glaring eyes. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone.